There once was a very well-known rabbi of Lublin who died after many years of service. His disciples gathered from near and far to divide all of his worldly goods. One chassid was gifted the books, another was gifted his talit, and when all was divided, there remained one humble chassid who was given the rabbi's clock. Now, this chassid had come from so far away and had a long journey home, so he decided to stop at an inn to rest for the night. When he realized that he had no money with which to pay the innkeeper, he had no choice but to offer the rabbi's clock as payment. The innkeeper accepted the clock and installed it in one of the rooms at the inn. Years later, another of the rabbi's disciples passed through the same town and stayed at that very inn. All night long, he could not sleep. All night, the innkeeper heard the restless footsteps of the chassid passing on the floor, back and forth, back and forth. In the morning, the innkeeper approached the weary chassid. "You didn't sleep at all last night. I heard you pacing all night long. Was there something wrong with the room? Was the bed too hard? Was the pillow too soft?" Well, the chassid was very agitated, and his face betrayed his fear. He grabbed the innkeeper by his lapels. "It was the clock. The clock in that room kept me up all night. That is no ordinary clock. Where did you find it? How did you come by it?" So the innkeeper relayed the story of his visitor years before. "I knew it. This clock belonged to the holy rabbi of Lublin. It is a special clock, a sacred clock, a holy clock. You see, all the other clocks in the world mark time from the past. All clocks measure where we've come and how far we've journeyed from our very beginnings. This clock is unique. This clock ticks from the future. It tells us how much more there is to do before redemption can be realized. Every time I laid down to rest, the clock said, 'Get up, how can you rest? Get to work now. You have so little time. So much of your life has passed away. How can you sleep? Get up, get up.'" You see, time is a tricky thing. We use it to measure almost everything. How long have we been employed at a workplace? 12 years. How many years have we had children, been married, been single? How much time did we spend with our loved one? How much time spent on this project or that show or at the beach? Counting our minutes, our hours, our years, they help us assign value or meaning to the relationships or experiences that we've had. Time also helps us understand and articulate our pain. We count hours of suffering, years of sacrifice, and days of mourning. We count to help us understand the weightiness of our grief. We've all been counting for some time, counting the months and years lived in this pandemic. And even though most of our lives have seen some increased normalcy, we're all here and most of us have no mask on, we count its impact too. Since this COVID pandemic hit our shores 2.5 years ago, 200,000 small businesses have closed, 20 million Americans lost their jobs, over 1 million have died of COVID in the United States, 6.5 million worldwide, and sadly, we will continue to count. These numbers are staggering, and then there are the losses that are harder to quantify, what I like to call ambiguous losses, like the lost connection with our neighbors, our friends, the people we see at the gym, our fellow congregants that once sat beside us on Friday nights or even here at Kol Nidre. The restaurants we loved and frequented on special occasions, they closed. And with it, so many memories of sweeter times dashed. We lost patience for the rules and the masking and the mandates. We lost passion for our life's work, especially when trying to be just as professional with children running underfoot. We missed countless soccer games and dance recitals and Broadway shows and movies in the actual theater. We stopped traveling. We stopped eating indoors. We missed proms and graduations and B'nai Mitzvah. And while some of us found creative ways to celebrate via Zoom and PCR testing and outdoor affairs, they didn't feel quite the same. Each of us carries and counts our personal losses from the past 2.5 years. And while so much has begun to return to normal, so many of us are still mourning, still figuring out how to rebuild after experiencing this modern-day plague. Our ancestors were very familiar with the nature of plagues. In the book of Numbers, the text reads, Vayhi acharei hamagefa, and after the plague. 4 little words that never jumped off the page so significantly to me until now. I'm certain that this 4-word verse, vaguely acknowledged by the commentators over 2 millennia, has been waiting until today to speak its truth. So we're going to speak it. How might we rebuild after such devastating loss? How did the Israelites rebuild after the plague? What comes after that verse? Well, after so much death and loss in their community, they took a census. They counted. They counted their living. And the rabbis tell us that this census was not just literal, but also spiritual. They took an accounting of what matters, of what was important, of how they might spend their days now that they have experienced such trauma firsthand. And so should we on this sacred day, when we hope and pray that we will be counted in the book of life for another year. How can we know what really matters? How can we truly make our lives count? Barry Mice reminds us that most Jews and our curious neighbors think of Yom Kippur as a 25-hour caffeine headache capped off by a lox and bagel binge. I won't say raise your hand if that's you, because it's me. But it is also, at its deeper level, a dry run for something quite morbid. In truth, Yom Kippur is a scandalous day for those of us who live in the modern world. It conjures up the prospect of death, still a great taboo in our society. It urges healthy and vigorous people to step off their treadmills or Peloton bikes for just a moment to listen to the fragile beating of their own hearts. It is the one day of the year when we ask Jews to look mortality in the face. And that is why we deny ourselves the earthly pleasures of food and drink and intimacy with our partners. That is why we utter long lists of confessionals, the same confessionals we're asked to say on our deathbeds. And many of us wear white, like the shrouds traditional Jews are buried in. Why such dramatic rituals? Why so much talk of death on this, the holiest day of the year? Well, death is a good motivator for change. Indeed, many of us have experienced this before. A doctor gives us a sideway glance about our lifestyle choices, warning of all the calamity to befall us should we continue to mosey down this particular path. Or a loved one passes from a particular disease, maybe something preventable, and we start to evaluate our own habits. Our traditions, the shapers of this day, they didn't want to tiptoe around the topic. They wanted our absolute attention. Pretend tonight was your last day on earth. What would you say? What would you do? Who would you want to talk to? Of what would you be most proud? Of what would you surely wish to erase? The truth is, none of us know when our time will come. The point of Yom Kippur isn't to scare us, like the clock in the inn, warning us that our time is almost up. No, this day is meant to inspire us to get on with living. But if this is a rehearsal, we should do it right. The rabbis believed when we die, we stand at the thresholds of the gates of heaven and should be prepared to answer 7 questions. I need 2 hands. 7 questions on that day. So since we are supposed to be rehearsing our last hour of living, we should probably see how we might answer those questions. Now, these 7 questions are designed for one purpose and one purpose only, namely to reveal how you lived your life on earth, to assess if you knew what really mattered, So if you had to guess what those questions might be, what God is going to ask you on that day, what would you guess? You didn't think you were coming to an interactive sermon. I know. I'm putting the pressure on you. I'm going to continue, I promise. What do you think God's going to ask you on your final day? Just shout it out. Did you lead a good life? Did you do something for other people? Good things. Did you give charity? Tzedakah. Those are pretty good guesses. I'm very proud of you. Okay. Yeah, were you a good person? Were you successful? Were you popular? God's probably not going to ask that. Did you make a lot of money? Did you give to charity? Did you use your time well? Did you answer every single email that's in that inbox? I'm in big trouble. But let's actually dig into the tradition and figure this out. Okay, number one, at the hour you enter heaven for judgment, they will ask you, Nasata v'natata be'emunah. Did you deal honestly with people in your business practices? Are you surprised? Like, the business comes first? What about, do you believe in God? Did you follow the 10 commandments at the very least? You know, there were 613, but 10? Come on. Okay, because honesty, integrity, and faithfulness, these are important things. And if you're not honest in your business dealings, can you be trusted to be honest in other relationships? If you are not honest with others, can you be honest with yourself? Honesty in business is so personal, only you would know the answer to that. It's not easy to live with lies. Your honesty reflects your authenticity. So question number one, are you honest? Number two, asakta b'friya urivia. Did you busy yourself with procreation? Now, for those that are going to get offended, this isn't asking if you had children or adopted children or raised children. The question isn't, did you procreate? The word asakta literally means, did you busy yourself? We use the same to how we study Torah. La'asok b'divrei Torah. Did you busy yourself with Torah? Did you busy yourself with procreation? What does that mean? Did you spend enough time with your family? Were you there when they needed you? Did you call on them when you needed them? Were you loving, forgiving, present? Did you invest in their growth, in their minds, in their purpose? Did you teach the next generation, your kids, your nieces, your nephews, your cousins, your younger siblings, even your mentees? Did you teach them how to be better, how to have courage, how to be kind, how to stand up for what is right? Question number two, did you busy yourself with procreation? What it's really asking, what is your legacy? Number three, Kava'ata itim la Torah. Did you set times for Torah? Okay, I know. It's the rabbi. I'm gonna strong arm you into some Torah study. Ask most adults these days if they take time for the study of Torah, and they'll say, I don't have time to breathe between my job and working and seeing friends and caring for family and so much more. We're always busy. We're all overworked. We're all overscheduled. When would I have time for Torah? But even 10 minutes of studying, picking up an article, reading it, we are exposing ourselves to new learning, new ideas, new insights that have infinite potential to infuse our lives with meaning. Jewish learning can be reflective. It can give us purpose. It can help us understand our world and our place in it. And most importantly, it's not for little kids. Religious school students are all doing it. You can do it too. Here at Temple Israel, we view Jewish learning as a path to come together, to form relationships with the fellow learners, but also with the text itself. So question three, are you setting time for learning and living Torah? Number four might be my favorite. Tzipita leYeshua. The literal translation of this reads, did you hope for deliverance? I'm going to rephrase it. Did you live with hope in your hearts? So I want you to picture a 13-year-old girl. She's in a cramped and stifling annex. She has no windows to the outside world, no sunrises or sunsets to warm her spirits, which is a blessing, really, because the Nazis are outside hunting down her family and friends. while she hides. But within those cramped quarters, writing by the light of one single candle, she finds a way to hope. Gunshots all around, food scarce, death imminent, and Anne Frank gives us page after page of inspiration and tikva, hope. She writes, where there's hope, there's life. It fills us with fresh courage and makes us strong again. Anne Frank wrote to stave off her pessimism, her fear of what the world had become. We can do that and more. When we dive into social justice work, when we work to register new voters, to fight to ensure reproductive freedom, when we confront or call out anti-Semitism or racism or any kind of bigotry, we are stating emphatically that we believe a brighter future is possible. That is the power of hope, inspiring us to never give up the fight for a better world. For where there is hope, there is life. So question 4, do you have hope in your heart? Question 5, pilpata bechokhma, havanta davar mitoch davar. Did you seek wisdom? Did you understand one thing from another? In short, did you figure out what's really important? Understanding what matters will lead you to a life that matters. Rabbi Eliezer taught in a Mishnah, repent one day before you die. And his sages were like, how do you know what that day is going to be? Like, how do you know? And then Rabbi Eliezer said, okay, repent every day, lest you die on that day. So what does that mean? It means to act as if every minute counted. Never go to bed angry with the ones you love. Kiss and hug the people you care about every day. Ask for forgiveness and grant it willingly. Focus on accumulating memories, not stuff. Don't get sidetracked by pettiness and greed. Prioritize meaning and memory making. So question 5, do you know what matters? And are you living with those things in mind? Okay, I lied. Number 6 is my favorite. It's a statement, but from it we derive the 6th question. The statement is this: a human being will have to account for all that his eye beheld and did not eat. The question is, were there earthly pleasures permitted to you that you did not enjoy? In other words, did you enjoy your life? Did you take advantage of all the gifts that God has given you? In Judaism, we have all sorts of blessings for moments of gifted joy. We have a blessing because without them, we might not realize that they are actually gifts. We have a blessing for smelling fragrant spices or trees, for seeing shooting stars, for vast deserts, for high mountains, for a sunrise, for hearing thunder, for seeing a rainbow or an ocean, for hearing good news. There's a blessing for everything. Don't sleep through your life. Put the phone down and be present. Question 6, are you enjoying all the gifts and blessings of this world? And finally, number 7. Before his death, Rabbi Zusia said, in the coming world, they will not ask me, why were you not Moses? They will ask me, why were you not Zusia? We are not asked, and we will not be asked, why weren't you more like Moses? Or why weren't you more like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Or why weren't you Gandhi? Or why weren't you even Rabbi Zusia? He's great. We are simply asked to be an original. Not perfect, and yet we are asked to be constantly perfecting the world, which in the end is how we perfect ourselves. So question 7, were you the best you could be? 7 questions that get to the heart of what matters. 7 questions that might guide us to be rebuilding after this time of significant loss by helping us focus on what counts. Now, the story of the chassid and the clock, there's another way that story is told. In the morning, the innkeeper approaches the chassid. The chassid was excited. His face was aglow. He grabbed the innkeeper by his lapels and swung him about in a joyful dance. It was the clock! It was the clock! And when the innkeeper explained how he had come by the clock, the chassid shouted joyfully, I knew it! This is the holy clock that belonged to the holiest of rabbis in Lublin, and every clock in the world tells us how much of our lives have passed and how much closer we are to the grave, but not this clock. This clock measures time from the future, from the redemption. This clock ticks towards the day that the Messiah will come and bring us peace. Every time I lay down to rest, the clock ticked one more tick, and I could do nothing but jump up and dance and celebrate when I realized how close we are to the world to come, how close we are to peace on earth. Standing on the threshold of this new year, looking back on all that we lost, we have two choices. We can continue to mourn and grieve and watch the clock wind down in fear that time is slipping away, or we can begin to count, like those Israelites, counting literally and spiritually. Count the people, those who know and love you best, those in your community, those faceless and nameless people, and attempt to make meaningful connections with them. Count time, and find ways to make this year, this day, this hour the most meaningful of your very existence. Count the 7 ways in which you might begin to live your best life, to be your best self. Kol Nidre is the only night in the entire year that we wrap ourselves in a talit. Usually we don't wear a talit after the sun sets. It's the most beautiful sight to behold, with the dark stripes set against the stark white fabric. One time a child asked, why the talit has stripes and not checkers? It's a very valid question. The answer? Because squares are finite and hopeless, and stripes come from infinity, and to infinity they go, like airport runways where angels land and take off. The talit with its stripes remind us that life is full of possibility. Yes, time is fleeting, and clocks, no matter how we read them, remind us of this unavoidable truth. But we still have time to live and love and laugh, and with unbridled enthusiasm, seize the opportunity to make every moment